the best thing you can do for your business to test its strength is leave it.
Welcome back to the 5THWAVE podcast. I'm Jeffrey Young, Editor-in-Chief of 5THWAVE. In today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome back here into the studio Edwin Harrison, the co-founder of London's Artisan and Curious Roux coffee roasters. Founded in 2011 by Edwin and his wife Magda, Artisan is a pioneering and influential voice in London's specialty coffee scene. Edwin and Magda also run the Artisan Coffee School, where they share their expertise and work to elevate standards across our industry. Today, Edwin shares the very ambitious project he's about to undertake, an extraordinary 6-month, 20,000 kilometre coffee journey with his entire family. That's mum, dad, and 3 children over land and sea from London to Perth, Australia. And no doubt along the way, they'll generate hundreds of coffee experiences across Europe, parts of the Middle East, Russia, the Silk Road, and Asia, all to deliver a bag of coffee to Magda's mother and a world record for the furthest coffee bag ever delivered by hand. Here at the 5THWAVE, we'll be following this incredible journey and keeping you updated on their progress. Tell us about your journey.
So yes, we're delivering a bag of coffee, hand-roasted in Chiswick, all the way to Magda's mum in Australia, in Perth, Western Australia, by hand, over land, over sea, and we've decided to take our 3 kids with us for the ride. They're 6, 8, and 11. We've bought an old Sprinter, Mercedes Sprinter, and kitted it out. And on February the 12th, we head east and south, and off we go. And the whole idea is to sort of discover coffee along the way. We say we're curious about coffee, but I always think you've got to live by what you say. And it's our time to go and discover what coffee is like around the world and document this journey through our social media as this one bag of coffee takes this sort of symbolic journey across the world. And we'll be following it as it goes through the Stans, through Russia, through China, through Indonesia, down into Australia. And that's the plan.
Will you be, by chance, going through the Yunnan province? Or
Yes, we are.
Yeah,
and we'll be stopping in there. And that's the idea, to go and discover these amazing coffee places.
Okay. So how long's the trip going to take in total?
So it's going to take 6 months. Almost to the day. It has to take 6 months because our boy's going to start back at a new school. Fingers crossed we're back in time for that.
Wow. What was the reason for deciding to give up your day job, or at least put your day job on pause?
Yeah.
And actually, is it family reasons, or what is it?
No, I think it's a really good question. And to give it context, I think people judge, and I've been working in hospitality for 14 years now, 15 years. People seem to judge success on the number of shops you've got. How many staff do you have, and so on and so forth. But I've never seen it that way. I've always seen it as a journey. And actually, a founder's journey needs to keep changing and evolving. I remember when we first started Artisan, it was super exciting. You know, that first coffee you sold, for us, it was a cappuccino, 1 sugar takeaway. And there was a challenge there. How do we educate Putney about specialty coffee? How do we teach them about this place? How do we get our name out there and all these things? But after a while, that becomes day in, day out. And for the founder, I think you then go, right, what next? So we open the second shop, and then it's exciting because you've got to work out how that's all going to work. And Magda and I, she had one shop, I had the other, and it was like this lovely little business, 2 shops, and so on and so forth. But again, after a year or 2, you think, what's next? Yeah. And we've always done this through our journey, and what we've always focused on is business infrastructure and amazing people. And I think that is what you've got to get right. Leave behind a trail of great business infrastructure and fantastic people. And that, to me, as an entrepreneur, is my job. But you have to then leave it for it to then work, for it to show you that it can stand up on its own 2 feet. So lo and behold, we left the 2 shops and set up the Artisan Coffee School. And that was, again, a whole new challenge for us, right? How do we educate people? What sort of courses are we going to do? How do we have an online platform to teach people? How do we actually take bookings? All of this sort of business infrastructure. So I love a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And you were suddenly figuring all this out. And actually, just recently, we've had our 10,000th student come through the school, which was just fantastic. And to think that now 10,000 people have been through that school, when back then we were just creating it. But what we left was great people, great trainers, and infrastructure. And when we were ready, we decided to move on to roasting. And suddenly you're there again. Literally, I remember saying to one of my colleagues, here's a blank piece of paper. We've got to fill it. Let's go. And all that enthusiasm comes back. And we started roasting in somebody's shed at the back of their garden sort of thing. And slowly over the last 8 years, Curious Brew has taken shape and got its own identity and begun to grow. And along the way, we have had two more, it's like children, coffee shops. But again, it goes back to that business infrastructure and people. And just last year, we moved to a fantastic new purpose-built roastery. And it suddenly, with all the bells and whistles, with the space, the school, the sensory lab, the silos, the ability to scale, and the amazing people to run it, I suddenly felt a little bit in the way. Do you know what I mean? I was like, they were, okay, Edwin, are you really here? Do you need to keep muscling in? I was like, okay, look, what next? And I think business is all about joining the dots and knowing when to trust in the process, trust in the system that you've created, and to step back. At the same time, I think being a parent is about showing your kids there's more to life than Southwest London. There's a whole world out there. I remember when we supported Project Waterfall and you guys introduced us to Splash, which was just a fantastic project in Ethiopia. Yeah. And More Than a Dent helped fundraise, I think it was £25,000 for that. The trip I took to go and see that project with my kids was so eye-opening for them. You could see them going, whoa, this isn't the Southwest London park. This is real life. And I just thought that was incredibly healthy. And it opened up so many nice conversations with them about what is the real world, what is the different cultures, and so on and so forth. And then going back to this joining the dots, it's knowing that we want to teach our kids about the world, knowing we were curious about coffee, knowing that Magda's mum lives in Australia, and knowing that if we're going to do it in our lives, now is the best time because our eldest is about to go to secondary school. We took a deep breath and thought, how do we join those dots? And I was for a while there, our delivery driver was away, and I was sat on Putney Bridge delivering our coffee that comes in buckets to the local coffee shops around us. I thought, God, I wonder how far I could have gone in this time over the 3 months. And I started daydreaming, I reckon I could have probably got, and I used to try and work out how far in the world I would have got round. Yeah. And I came back to Magda and said, I reckon you'd probably deliver a bag of coffee to your mum if we needed to. And she looked at me and said, why don't we give it a go? And then it then quite quickly snowballed, and we were like, this is amazing. We can go to different roasters all around the world. One thing I think that is so unique to the coffee industry is it's one big community. It is so easy to literally pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm a roaster from London. I'm just stopping through Uzbekistan, just wondering if we can come and have a quick chat. And that's us connecting the dots. That's us going to see the amazing world of coffee. And I literally can't wait to get started. Wow.
So as you're about to embark upon this incredible tour, let's go back to the beginning before we head off onto the vision of this journey. But let's take us back to those 14 years ago, or even before, when you conceived the idea of Artisan. I know you've been on the show, but our podcast has evolved a lot, and so many of the listeners may not have heard the story before. But wonder if you could tell us about that early journey and what inspired you to get into the coffee industry, and is it linked to heading to Australia right now as well?
I suppose I think everything's linked in a way. As you may remember, we worked in Western Australia. We did the typical sort of university master's grad program into a big business route, and got really drunk on red wine one evening, that sort of happy drunk where you're just talking about the world and talking, there must be more than these emails I've been moving backwards and forwards. And we said, why don't we quit? Why don't we go and do something completely else? And in the haze, the hangover the next day, we both walked in and resigned from our jobs. And we didn't want to sort of go backpacking or traveling or anything like this. We wanted to go and use our skills that we had. So we moved to Uganda in East Africa and worked for a development agency over there called Lidifo. And I was tasked with setting up the Ugandan beekeeping program, looking after bees and making honey. And I knew nothing about it. I literally read Beekeeping for Beginners on the plane over. And we were met by this tiny little guy called Daniel, who was going to be our director. And as you sort of get off the aeroplane, you get just a hit with that heat of Africa, don't you? Just smacks you in the face. And I remember him going, Edwin, I'm so glad you're here. We need 700 beekeepers, 3.5 tons of honey, and no external influence to the West. I said, well, mate, okay, great, but literally, if we can find a place to sleep and just get started, let's do that. He said, no problem. And we took this 9-hour bumpy bus journey to Kasese, which is in the Ruwenzori Mountains, next to the Congo. And as we got off the bus, there was Daniel again. And he said, Edwin, I need 700 beekeepers, 3.5 tons of honey, and no external influence to the west. I said, mate, that's great, but we haven't even found a place to live. Give us a chance. He was like, oh, no, it's no problem. So we then went to our accommodation, bunkered down for the next day, the evening, and the next morning, I'm not joking, was on the door. I opened the door. He's like, Edwin, 700 beekeepers, 3.5 tons of honey, no external influence to the west. He must have told me this about 20 times. I remember once he shouted it across the field to the point where I was beginning to get cross. I said, Daniel, out of interest, do you have any beekeepers? No. So, Daniel, do you have any beehives? No. I was like, Daniel, do you have any money? No. I was like, Daniel, are there in fact any bees in Uganda? He said, my friend, you go find them. And we started this amazing project, literally with a white piece of paper. And I remember thinking, wow, I can actually see my successes like in front of me. I can see the failures, the mistakes, and we made loads in Uganda in front of me. And as we got to 30 beekeepers, it started getting a bit more motivating. Then after about a year, we got to 300 beekeepers. We were producing about 1/2 ton of honey, 1.5 tons of honey. And no external influence west means no money coming in to support the project, but there still was a little bit. From a standing start, not too bad. You know what Magda and I thought? We're halfway there. And we kept working until we got to 700 beekeepers, 3.5 tons of honey, and no external from the west. We then watched the project for about a month, packed our bags, and left. Daniel taught me something incredibly important in that first week. The power of a crystal clear vision. And I've never forgotten it. Straight from the offset, he was like, the vision is 700 beekeepers, 3.5 tons of honey, and no external influence from the west. Where I think people go wrong in hospitality is their vision flip-flops as they're trying to create their business. Oh, we're going to do a music venue. No, we're going to have amazing coffee. No, we're going to do Eggs Benedict. No, we're going to do... If they don't know what they're doing, there's no way the customer's going to understand it. So I think we took that from hospitality into Artisan right from the start. We want to be simply the best coffee in Southwest London. That's it. Nothing more complicated. Yeah. And then it allowed us to really understand Artisan right from the start. It's got one very simple philosophy. Everything we now do is around trying to make the best cup. And if you actually track our journey from opening 2 or 3 sites to then opening the coffee school, well, the coffee school then naturally feeds into the best coffee. The roasting feeds into the best coffee. So everything became very simple once we had a simple vision. And however crazy this idea might sound, it is, in a nutshell, incredibly simple. We're taking 1 bag of coffee and trying to set the world record for the furthest hand-delivered bag of coffee in the world, to Magda's mum, who's sitting in Gwelup, Western Australia, in Perth, waiting for us to arrive. And on the way, we'll be discovering that as you do. Because I think a lot of what I believe is it's never really about the destination. It's about the journey, the coffee journey that you go on as a founder. I couldn't think of anything less inspiring than rolling out shop after shop. For me, that's not interesting. Yeah. It's not exciting. For me, it's about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, trying to do different things that you don't understand, figuring them out. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what I love. And this is now just one fairly complicated jigsaw puzzle on how to get them. One of the most complicated part was getting our Russian visa, which Magda, I don't think I've ever seen her get stressed in 15 years. But that was as close as she's got to showing stress, I think, as we were doing those forms.
Wow, what a brave endeavor. Brave just even deciding to leave your business in the hands of some wonderful people, no doubt, that you've nurtured over so many years. You've put in place the infrastructure, but there are not many business leaders that can let go so easily like that.
I think you're right. It is brave, or not brave. I think it's about understanding when to let go and what to let go of. Also, I think you have to remember that we are now in a much more connected world than we've ever been before in our lives. Yeah. Your sound producer is in Australia right now, and it just reminds us that location is no longer a barrier to achievement. And we will still be, it's that thing, we'll still be there to support our top team. We have a structure in place on Tuesday afternoons for a dial-in to our top team and different parts of the business. And we will make those meetings happen come hell or high water, because we know that's what we're dedicating to them. We will be there 100% to support them during that time. But what's been really interesting, and what I've loved about this like pre-trip time, is the amount of little stuff I've suddenly got done to go. The things that you're thinking, I really should get round to that. But now I know I'm going, I'm like, what are all the passwords? Where are they all kept? Who has access to them? Let's get that all cleaned up. How does all the printers work? How do I create a little training manual to make sure that if I'm not here, somebody knows? Because the last 6 months, I've just constantly been saying to myself, if I'm not here, how is that question answered? Yeah. If I'm not here, and what a great exercise for a business to go through. And somebody once told me, who I hugely respect, that the best thing you can do for your business to test its strength is leave it. And we're going to give it a go.
Wow. Off on an amazing journey. The route, I've got the route here in front of me. We'll have to put a copy of it up on the show notes so people can actually see. I see it winding through Europe.
So through Europe, and that's where the tricky bit is. We then you have a choice of Iran or Russia. Us for a very obvious reason.
Yeah, right now, especially.
And then you go through into the Stans and you pick up the Silk Road, which I thought naively was just one lovely road that we could follow, but it's not. It's a network of many roads across Central Asia. But it's a place that one of the areas I'm absolutely fascinated to see. And it's amazing just Googling now in Tashkent, for example. I looked up in ChatGPT, what's a coffee scene in Tashkent? Yeah. Most random place. And suddenly you see a thriving, two brothers have set up this roastery. Then you've got this specialty guy over here. And, can't wait to go and see them and hear about what their journey is and what it's like to do business in coffee in those areas and so on and so forth. In China, you can't self-drive a vehicle without a guide. Yeah. So we're picking up somebody to come with us, which I'm quite relieved about. I don't know how they're going to feel being in a van with my 3 children, but they're going to have to learn how to play a lot of I Spy and Yellow Car and things like that. But China, I think, will be just a phenomenal experience. And then we get into the sort of coffee belt side of things where, yeah, exactly. So Laos, Thailand, and Malaysia, Indonesia. We'll have to sort of almost drag ourselves away from coffee plantations and farms and processing centers and all these sorts of things as we then get into southern Java. And then something very unique happened, to be honest with you. The bit that's always worried me is how do you cross the East Timor Sea without a plane? Because, of course, we're trying to get the world record. And there are no ferries, there are no sort of crafts. And I was in Perth watching the first test. And there was a friend of mine who was there who had invited some of his family across, and he happened to live in Darwin. And we go through that, that 6 degrees of separation. He then introduced me to somebody who knew a bit about sailing. He then introduced me to somebody who was in a yacht club. He then introduced me to the Commodore of the yacht club, all through email and Zooms, who then told me there's a sailing race happening on the 8th of August or the 1st of August from Darwin to a very remote island called Banda. And as I happen to be a yacht master and done quite a lot of sailing in the past, I've got hold of them and I've offered myself the bag of coffee and my son to deliver the yacht back to Darwin. Oh, wow. And fingers crossed, with the person who owns it, of course, that will work. So I think we're literally going to end up sailing into Australia in a little sailing boat to Darwin, where Magda and the 2 girls will meet us, and then we'll continue overland to Perth, Western Australia.
You'll be heading, no doubt, through Broome.
Yeah, through Broome, across the Kimberley, into Broome, and then down. And this goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's definitely in the journey, not the destination, because by our calculations, we'll have about a week in Perth before we jump on a flight and go home.
Wow. So what are some of the planning that you've actually had to do for this trip? Clearly, you've used that time to get your business, find those passwords and make sure that the business is, but in terms of the actual planning for a trip of this magnitude, must be inoculation. Is it?
Yeah.
What do you have to, what things, and how long since you actually decided we're doing this to how long until you leave?
It's probably been spoken about for about 3 years now amongst very close family.
Yeah.
And friends, often in a sort of drunken way. Do you know what I mean? Oh, I'm going to drive to Australia. And then really, unfortunately, my younger brother bet me 50 quid that I wouldn't make it, which made me even more determined to go. I was like, he's snookered me now, because now I have to go to Australia just to prove my little brother wrong. But yeah, it then has ramped up over the last year. I think the moment I knew that we were going was when we bought a 2010 white van, workers van, Mercedes Sprinter medium wheelbase. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, this is real. We've taken that step. And then I heard myself talking to a group of friends who were just going to put some like business class seats in the back of it, put the kids in and drive to Australia. And it just sounded so ridiculous that I almost started crying with laughter. I was like, hearing the words for the first time spoken out loud about what we're doing just made me think, oh my God. It's the first time I got butterflies, and I was like, well, I'm really put out my comfort zone here. But I've become a lot more confident in it now. Yeah. That was the very first, this is what we tried to do. How does it sound? And just making it sound ridiculous, to actually, this is a phenomenally great opportunity for the family. It's a phenomenally great opportunity for our business, following the bag, curious through of bag, for a social media point of view. We're going to document the whole journey through our channels. And we're also going to talk about how we created the 5 shops, how we created the roastery, how we created the school, in like little snippets of information. Does that make sense? To just share our time as a founder and as an entrepreneur. So yeah, once you got the van, I think then I was like, we've now got to really go. And then it's like eating an elephant, isn't it? It's like small bit by small bit. What's the route around here? Visas have been a big part. The jabs have made our family almost fall out before we started. We've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. And they were not particularly happy about the situation of getting 6 jabs in their arm. But we got through that. And I love doing things that I don't know how to do. I love the jigsaw puzzle. And then it's the route. And we're now at the fun bit of going, and if anyone is anywhere on this route, of who can we see that's coffee related? Who can we go and talk to? Any of your listeners, by all means, get in touch and we'll come and visit. And we have this idea of taking one bag of coffee to a place in France, and then picking up their bag of coffee, and it will go to Italy and their bag of coffee. So it's like a domino effect as we pass along a bag of coffee across the world, and off we go, really.
Wow. And the route itself, clearly you can see, absolutely. You can drive through Europe, down into Romania and into Turkey. And that's after that. In our sort of Western world, are there places here that you are sure that your vehicle can get through? Is that being able to use it?
So I often think that, what we've looked at very hard is real life experiences in a timely manner. So actually, the person I'm most interested in at the moment is somebody who's on YouTube talking about how they drove across the Kazakhstan to Turkmenistan border. I'm watching intently, not just at what they're saying, but what's the surrounding like? What's the road look like? Yeah. What's the traffic? All of these things. And we're reaching out to some of them, rather than people at dinner parties going, oh my God, that's terrible. You never passed there. You've no idea. And you actually do a bit of digging. Yeah, I was there 20 years ago. Okay. Let's relax. Let's look at the real time thing. And from all reports, there's a route. It's not an easy route, but there's definitely a route through. And in some bits, we've had to be very specific, like for the Russian visa, we had to even tell them what road we're going to be on, when we're going to be on it. And so we've really, in some areas, we've really gone deep. In other areas, we're presuming it's going to be okay.
Easy going through Thailand, that's not bad.
Thailand, you can see quite a few. We're spending a few days there because I'm looking forward to
there's a good coffee scene there.
Exactly. Yeah. Being on a beach in a banda, thinking, right, next bit, sailing.
Wow, yeah. It's a bit surreal that after 5 days, you'll be arriving in Perth, after 6 months, and then 5 days in Perth, you'll be just heading back and what are you expecting to find?
I don't know. And I don't know what we'll feel. Yeah. I don't know what we'll be feeling about the business.
Yeah.
I don't know what we'll be feeling about the journey. In a very weird way, the business is something that I think I have the most confidence about.
Yeah.
We do have great business infrastructure. We do have fantastic people who we trust with our lives, to be honest with you. They've worked with us for many years. They know how we think. They know how we operate, and we're not abandoning them. Like I said, that once a week meeting will be a ritual. And worst case scenario is we can always solve problems where we come across them. The bit that, if I'm being completely honest, the bit that worries me the most is probably spending that amount of time in a very small, tight space with my 3 kids and Magda. Just realistically, it's something that we've never done before. It will either bring us hugely close together as a family, but I'm interested to know if there'll be pushback from the kids, whether we'll get 3/4 in and it's just, oh God, do we have to go again in this van? Bloody hell, Dad, why are we here? I want to go back to my friends. I want to go back to my home. Or whether they'll be genuinely excited and they'll come with us. And that will very much come down to the way Magda and I pitch ideas, the way what things we do on the loan. And you got to remember, we've got to try and homeschool them as we're going. They've never been homeschooled. I actually spent the weekend Googling homeschool apps to work out what was the best option for how we homeschool them. To be honest, I think we'll take a light touch approach, because to me, the education is empathy, it's understanding cultures, it's seeing the world, it's learning how things work in different places, rather than the maths, the English, the science. But of course, we'll try and keep them a little bit. They're going to write a diary, is going to be their main. That's probably my weak point. I remember trying to do it in COVID. It didn't go so well then, so I don't think it's going to go well this time.
I have so much admiration for you and your family of having taken this choice. I think I'm even envious. I think it's absolutely, it's what can possibly go wrong. But at the same time, what a journey, what a family bonding. Clearly, you're adventurous. You've been adventurous from the very beginning. It's incredible how much you've actually got done in 14 years. If I look at how you've created the business, you've had 3 children. And now you're setting off again on a new adventure.
And I think that would be my one bit of advice for anyone who's serious about making a career in coffee or hospitality, is to keep moving forward. Keep thinking about something in a slightly different way. And leave behind a trail of, I know we talked about it, but of business infrastructure, amazing people, because then you do occasionally, just occasionally, have time to have a coffee, have a sip and think, do you know what? We did this. More Than a Dent was just 3 years ago was just a fantastic aspect of what we were doing in terms of setting up that charity. And again, suddenly, all the brain cells start going again. How do we get the message out? What's the structure? How do we actually set up a charity in the UK? Who do we need to talk to? And that's no easy task. As you're getting all the paperwork sorted out, registered numbers and so on and so forth, then how do you partner with certain people? Who do you partner with? Who's safe? And off you go again. And I think that's probably what we've been okay at, is taking a deep breath and going, let's go. What's next? And this just happens to be us joining the dots. And
So just a bit of a refresher on More Than a Dent. Tell us about the vision there.
So More Than a Dent. So as we spoke about earlier, I set up this beekeeping program in Uganda, and Magda set up a vocational education center. And we just loved the development world. And I could see where aid and development went wrong. Literally, and it does quite often. And I can see then the opposite of where it works and where it has a huge impact. And I often thought it would be amazing if our business could in some way loop all the way back to where we started this journey, which was getting off that aeroplane in Uganda and getting hit by that African heat, and support some projects. But we wanted to do it in our own way. So we set up More Than a Dent. More Than a Dent has, as charities have very strict criteria. We put a very strict criteria on ours. It will only ever support one project a year. And that project has to have a long-term deliverable. And the simple measure for that is, can our kids go and see that project in 15 to 20 years' time? Will it still be having an impact? And if the answer is yes, we're likely to support it. Now, when we linked with you guys and Splash, it was very clear to me that the water infrastructure that they were putting in, the osmosis system they were putting in that primary school in Ethiopia, was going to be there for the next 15, 20 years. But not only that, what I loved about it is they were using parts from Ethiopia. They were manufacturing it in Ethiopia. They were training people in Ethiopia to work it. It was all local led. So if something went wrong with it, it was going to get fixed. Because I've seen projects where they don't think of those things and they fail. So we were absolutely delighted to support that project. And then we use our own business to basically fundraise through. We have a donation day within all the 5 artisans. The Curious Roux creates a more than a dent coffee that people buy. And we just create a sort of a noise around it very heavily for about a month. And we normally raise about £25,000 a year. And then that goes to support the project. More Than a Dent is small in its very nature. It's myself, Magda, and 2 trustees. We have no ambitions to grow beyond our means. We just want to quietly get on with it. And I think this is what it comes down to the most. If in 20 years' time, I can sit down one evening, have a whiskey, and think, God, do you remember the project in Ethiopia, Nepal, China? And we go through 20 different projects that have had long-term impact. Maybe just then, in that moment, we've made more than a dent. And that's where it comes down to.
Okay. You never know what the opportunities for more than it might come.
Exactly. And we are searching as we go through. We'll be looking for projects that we can support over the next 3, 4, 5 years. And that's sort of the side part of the journey. Because that's one of the things is when you create something, different opportunities like sprout out of it.
Yeah.
And I always think that's almost the fun part. When we talked about delivering a bag of coffee to Magda's mum, we hadn't even thought about the opportunities for more than a dent.
Yeah.
But suddenly, they're there and they're appearing. We hadn't talked about the opportunities of sharing what we're learning with the Artisan Coffee School, but suddenly they're there. And then in all of our shops, it's going to be mapping the journey and the team will, so suddenly you've got buy-in from your customers. So that's nice. And then suddenly Curious Roux is getting maybe a little bit more recognition. So that's nice. And suddenly these ideas begin to make sense. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Just from going back to we were first talking about one simple vision.
Yeah.
How do we get a bag of coffee to Magda's mum in Australia?
Wishing you and the family, Edwin, great health, great success, but just a wonderful journey. And thank you for joining us here on 5th Wave.
You're absolutely welcome.
And that's all for this week's 5th Wave podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share the link with a friend or colleague. Also, if you're on Apple or Spotify, we'd really love a 5-star review to help us increase our reach across the industry. To stay informed, visit worldcoffeeportal.com to get access to all the latest global coffee news, including the weekly coffee dose, collecting all the big coffee news stories. Links are in the show notes. This episode was produced in the one and only Serendipity Studios in glorious Camden, North London. It was produced by myself, Jeffrey Young, Hannah Heath, and sound engineering by Chris Bristow. And this week's very apt song in collaboration with the Coffee Music Project is Earth Song by Zaina Messia. Until next time, stay safe, stay caffeinated, stay curious.
We all carry her deep inside. Turn down the noise, you will hear her cry. 'Cause we're all made up of light. We need her love so can do without. Grace in the mountains and the seas. Alive in a forest of trees. Kindness in the miracle of life. How much more can she take? Can you see that she is done? Wish I could live in the world Martin saw in his dream, where is one human race, come together in peace and harmony. 'Cause we all just dust in the wind. Is this where we end, or we begin with a grace in the mountains and the seas? Alive in the forest of trees. Kindness in the miracle of life. How much more can she take? Can't you hear that she's crying? She's been given ever since the beginning. Why can't you see? She might be little tired now. There comes a time when no matter